Hello, my name is Caroline. I'm a student at Ramfield College. Today I'm sharing a paper with you that I wrote as a hypothetical campaign on retail therapy. When evaluating retail therapy, we can find the many flaws tied to this form of coping, and we come to find that it is essentially a hoax. The vast problem is that big corporations work to attract consumers only to profit off their vulnerabilities. It is very common for a person to participate in retail therapy as a way of healing. In actuality, shopping only fixes our personal problems temporarily, acting as a band-aid for a wound that cannot be healed so simply. Retail therapy gets in the way of obtaining a happier and healthier lifestyle. When people excessively shop, it is often safe to assume there's a deeper meaning behind this. Obsessive shopping is typically tied to certain emotions that trigger this, which can involve stress, emptiness, boredom, or not having the courage to seek help from another person. In all, shopping fills a hole or a void that remains unsolved. In this case, the targeted audience are college students. More specifically, students who are opening their first line of credit are at a point in their college career where they are learning independence. For this campaign, it is valuable that the audience is willing to gain more knowledge. They need to step into the role of financial responsibility, which is a big part of adulthood. Through this campaign, they will be able to step outside of this coping mechanism and find better forms of therapy that will benefit them long term. The need is to lead a successful life with the hopes of also benefiting generations to come. When brainstorming on a topic of choice, it took lots of thought. Retail therapy stood out over all the other topics that came to mind. In society, it is apparent that everything costs money no matter where it comes from. It is easy to fall into a pattern of being submissive to spending, especially for one's desires. It takes a lot of power and control to not fall under society's pressures of active trends or social status. The reason behind being passionate about this topic is because it is important to believe that saving money is intrinsically valuable. It has been seen that this form of therapy has a strong hold on many to the point where this is seen as casual. From this campaign, my goal is for those targeted to understand the importance of saving, whether they earn money through work, allowance, etc. They will learn to budget and save a % with every earning. The outcome of behavior changes will be that the students become extremely responsible about when to use their credit card through reasonable thinking in terms of what they can and can't afford. They will be logical in the sense that a credit card is never free money. The audience will hopefully end up saving money, catering towards their needs, while accepting that the wants are simply not a priority at the moment. The most important part of this all is to find other forms of therapy to cope with personal problems without turning to spending. To further speak on the target audience of college students, it is important to note that they are at a time in their lives when they are introduced to becoming adults as far as independence and responsibility. In their age group, they need to be aware of the reality of being an adult, as it has many components, more than they may not have known previous to. When applying to get a credit card, there were so many unanswered questions. It is necessary to educate them on the ins and outs of a credit card so there's no confusion. Some constraints that may occur are students being hesitant. Some people in this age group can oftentimes be confident that they know everything and do not need help. The involvement needed from students in a hypothetical seminar would be active listening and possibly engaging with the speaker. Asking questions will help gain as much knowledge as possible. Students could also get involved by taking notes to help them in the real world so they feel more confident. The level of communication that will take place here is interpersonal communication, which is when two or more people engage in conversation. Interpersonal communication will happen when the speaker is projecting all this information to them as well as working to engage students. Another form of communication will be intrapersonal communication. This takes place when one has an internal conversation with themselves. Students will likely formulate questions in their minds and take the information in with their own understanding. This campaign's key message is to put retail therapy to an end with knowing how to be a responsible adult so the future is brighter and happier. With the knowledge of responsibility and being successful, life becomes a lot easier and less stressful, allowing room to be able to live life to the fullest. If someone is hooked by retail therapy, they can be less likely to achieve their goals and will constantly be in a loop that is harmful towards their own mental health. Sorry. This campaign takes a very informative approach while also bringing about vulnerability. The whole objective in this campaign is to inform students with the hopes they make smarter decisions with a better head on their shoulders. In some ways, this could make students vulnerable if they choose to open up or get involved and really become proactive. Overall, this campaign reaches the primary audience who should be aware of the harms of retail therapy and no independent financial responsibility. For one, because they will be more aware of saving money. It is intrinsically valuable to always have money for a multitude of reasons, such as to invest in something long-lasting or having emergency money. Secondly, they will take their negative emotions and put it into healthier forms of therapy that can help maintain proper mental health. The audience should work to change their behavior so they can mature by having more knowledge and being in touch with the real world. It is very easy to spend money, and oftentimes discipline takes a lot of effort. When you purchase something you want, there is joy, often followed by guilt. In retrospect, working harder will always feel more rewarding. It is a powerful feeling to know that guilt will never be present when you are constantly doing right for yourself.
I have a question. I think this is such an important topic that people your age don't talk enough about, and so I love this campaign. I think it's a really great idea. I had one question. I don't know if you ever saw the movie version of Thank You for Smoking, but there's this moment where Big Tobacco is finally forced to run ads telling kids not to smoke. And so what do? Because of course they really want kids to keep buying cigarettes. They propose ads that say, your parents want you to stop smoking, because they know that kids will do exactly what their parents don't want them to do, right? And that kids are really concerned about being cool. And so I just wondered if you thought about shopping and buying into consumer culture is also a way, you mentioned therapy, but it's also very much a way that kids try to fit in, right? And maintain social status. And I wondered if you thought about some ways that your campaign could make it cool and have some social currency around the idea of having some money in the bank to that you'll be able to use in the future is very empowering, and is something that should be should have social currency or be considered cool, without of course shaming people who are poor.
Yes, I definitely thought about more of a younger speaker, someone who fits in the age group, who has that knowledge, as well as mainstream social media like Instagram and TikTok, because I know a lot of people my age are there, and I use Instagram to gear people towards TikTok. So.
Yeah, such a great topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is CASOLA. I'm a junior at Ramapo College, and I will be sharing a paper I wrote, a hypothetical campaign about understanding the disease of addiction. Addiction Has No Bias is a campaign that will educate audiences on drug use and the disease of addiction. Ideally, it will help to end the stigma associated with both. The majority of people have very limited knowledge on addiction and substance abuse, which therefore makes these issues heavily misunderstood. Most individuals who struggle with drug abuse will not reach out for help because they are afraid of being mistreated or misunderstood by society. The stigma created around drug use, abuse, and addiction has created a very toxic and dangerous ideology about those who use recreational drugs. This leads those who are struggling down a dangerous path, which becomes very difficult to recover from. Although recovery isn't easy, it is possible. No one asks to become addicted to a substance, so it's unfair to treat a person as if they have chosen a path of no return. Anyone who wants it for themselves should be given the grace and opportunity to start clean. The topic of addiction is one that hits close to home. I believe that it is incredibly important for everyone to know the truth behind the struggle, behind the disease. However, all change must start somewhere. High school and college students are the ideal audience for this campaign. They need to be made aware of the very real issues brought on by addiction and understand that addiction can affect anyone. It has no bias. By educating these students, the message will grow faster, and hopefully they will have enough knowledge of the issue to avoid following a similar path in the future. Additionally, the preventative measures that can be taken but are often overlooked must be talked about. Tools such as fentanyl testing strips and Narcan can be used to save lives, yet almost no one knows about them. By providing these tools to the public without judgment or stigma, more people who are struggling with addiction will be able to take the steps necessary to ensure that they are being as safe as possible. More lives will be saved this way. The key promise of Addiction Has No Bias is to end the stigma around drug addiction so that more people who are struggling feel safe and supported coming forward for help. A common misconception is that if drugs and addiction are more widely talked about, kids will be more inclined to experiment with drugs at a younger age. However, the reality is just the opposite. By educating the community beginning at the high school level, there will be a stronger collective understanding around addiction. It certainly is not a choice. Without these conversations, addicts will only continue to be left out and pushed aside. Using drugs does not make someone a bad person or a lost cause. It does, however, put them at a greater risk of untimely death. These are the issues that need to be addressed when speaking about addiction. Additionally, preventative measures must be discussed and implemented in order to ensure the safety of any person who partakes in drug use, most specifically the use of Narcan and testing strips. Fentanyl testing strips are a simple yet effective way to test any supply of drugs for traces of fentanyl. You can often get these tests for free or for under $5. Fentanyl is a very powerful drug, and it is very easy to intake a lethal dose. It is currently being used to lace street drugs like cocaine, heroin, and even marijuana. Based on lab results, 2 out of 5 seized counterfeit pills contain lethal doses, which the DEA defines as being 2 milligrams of fentanyl. Narcan, also known as naloxone, is a nasal spray that can be administered to an individual suffering from an opioid overdose. It helps to reverse the effects of an overdose within minutes. Narcan is extremely easy to administer and to obtain. Every state in the United States has access laws or alternative arrangements in place that allow an individual to obtain naloxone from a pharmacist without prescription. I would also make it a priority to inform my audiences about the Good Samaritan laws. Good Samaritan laws are written to encourage bystanders to get involved in emergency situations without fear that they will be sued if their actions inadvertently contribute to a person's injury or death. So even if the bystander is under the influence themselves, they will not be arrested for getting help for someone who needs it. In shorter terms, you can save a life without fearing for your own. By partaking in these discussions, audiences will be able to live longer, healthier lives. They will have the knowledge needed in order to make smart choices about partaking in drug use. Furthermore, audiences of this campaign will have the potential to become a voice of reason for someone in their lives who may be struggling. More and more lives will continue to be lost to addiction if these issues are not taken more seriously and fully understood. As a society, we need to do better at helping those who need it, rather than pushing them aside, which only creates a larger issue. My primary audience will consist of high school students ages 14 through 18, as well as anyone dealing with an active addiction. I believe that it is important to start the conversation around drugs at the high school level. Treat the issue with the same urgency as you would a drunk driving campaign. Additionally, there are many resources that can be made available to addicts through my campaign that are otherwise difficult for them to find on their own. People may not want to believe it, but the key to preventing future addictions is by educating about the issue now before it's too late. Education is the first step for change. The unintended audience will consist of recovering addicts. My campaign may not directly affect them, but it is working to educate the public on a disease that they work every day to beat. I believe that the message my campaign aims to spread will benefit this group of people, even if it is indirectly. It is not my intention to use scare tactics. However, it is important not to shy away from unpleasant facts. For example, addicts are more likely to lie and steal from family members and friends. Additionally, in many cases, addiction causes a chemical imbalance in the brain which can cause serious harm to the person addicted. It is much easier to prevent an addiction from starting than to try to handle it when it's already out of control. It's impossible to prevent every person from using drugs. However, by explaining the consequences and reality of what drug addiction does to a person, people will become more vigilant and aware of the very real dangers that can occur when using. A huge misunderstanding is that only hard drugs like cocaine, heroin, or meth can cause a person to overdose. However, even more mild drugs such as marijuana or mushrooms can be laced with lethal amounts of fentanyl. It is the goal of my campaign to make people more knowledgeable and understanding about the very real disease of addiction. My campaign will use community and mass communication methods to spread our message. Addiction is a very serious issue and not something to be taken lightly. Therefore, I believe that by using mass communication, such as social media, to spread our message, we will be able to reach our target audience much more directly. Creating a conversation online is tremendously beneficial when trying to promote awareness. Additionally, hosting community-based events that anyone can attend will be extremely beneficial for this campaign. At our community events, we will host speakers who will talk about their experience with addiction, whether they have overcome addiction personally or have experienced being around someone in active addiction. They will create a conversation that will be hard to ignore. Hearing firsthand how addiction affects a person and the people around them will allow for change and acceptance within the community. The events will work to spread awareness and encourage people to take drug addiction more seriously. Additionally, and most importantly, our events will be stigma-free. Those struggling will not be shamed. They will be encouraged to seek help or at the very least take precautionary measures when using. If we can understand where the issue stems from, we have a better chance at providing help for those who need it. Every community needs to be informed about these issues. It is an occurrence in every neighborhood regardless of economic status. This is not an issue of rich versus poor, which is what so many people believe. Schools teach about drugs starting at the middle school level. However, kids are not taught about the severity of the opioid epidemic. These are statistics that teens and adults need to be made aware of so that there is a full collective understanding of the issues at hand. It will not be easy. In fact, many schools avoid the conversation surrounding opioids and overdose prevention altogether. It is my goal to change this. To conclude, Addiction Has No Bias is a campaign that has the potential to make a great deal of change within each community it reaches. Struggling addicts or anyone dealing with substance abuse disorder are a part of a minority group that is constantly being overlooked. It is necessary now more than ever that we engage and educate communities on the very real disease of addiction. It is possible for anyone to develop an addiction, however, it can be prevented if the correct measures are taken. The stigma surrounding drug use and abuse must die down. It is the very reason why it is so difficult for addicts to come forward. Through education and compassion, I know that a difference can be made. Lives can be saved and repaired. It is never too late to recover. Recovery is possible for anyone, and no one should be made to feel or think otherwise. The conversation surrounding addiction must continue so that the disease itself can begin to dissipate.